Hi, my name is Ashish Gadnis, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of BanQu. Today, I'm going to talk about climate-friendly brands. A lot of brands today are making some major commitments around Scope 3, carbon emissions, net zero, offsets, and things like that. But they're missing three critical elements, and I want to share those three today, so hopefully your climate-friendly brand can achieve those. Number one, if you look at the Scope 3 emissions dialogue that is happening today, a lot of times companies have a good understanding around Scope 1 and Scope 2, but they have a massive blind spot when it comes to Scope 3 because their Scope 3 is actually dependent on their Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5 suppliers. And most often, companies are pulling all this information in fragmented basis, and they do not really have a good handle on their Scope 3 emissions. So the first tip I'd love to share is that make sure that you take a very concise data approach to understanding who are the players in your supply chain, what is their Scope 3 responsibility as it pertains to your brand, because if you don't do that, your calculations and your commitments are going to be off, and you will not meet some of the new EU regulations, which is tied to the Green Deal. You will not be able to meet them. That's tip number one. Tip number two is LCA, lifecycle assessment. It's a common term that's being thrown around. What's missing in the LCA conversation is that, is your LCA linked to your supply chain? Is the LCA linked to the responsibility of the tiers in your supply chain? In a way, you're not spending 90 days trying to gather all the data that I just talked about in the first tip, and then it's too late because the data is too old. So the second tip is make sure your lifecycle assessment is connected to a supply chain that is giving you real-time information and real-time data. Third tip is regulations. There's a lot of confusion today in terms of who has to apply for what, who needs to really meet what regulations. So the third tip is understand what is your scope in context of those EU regulations or other regulations. And based on that, make sure that the data that you're capturing is evidence-based. A lot of times companies look at aggregated data, specifically around Scope 3 or greenhouse gas emissions. The problem with that, it's not evidence-based. If you don't have evidence-based data, then from a regulatory compliance perspective, you are not going to be able to meet those requirements when it comes to your climate obligations. So hope these three tips help you becoming a climate-friendly brand and you can actually prove it. Thank you.